And hopefully time to answer all your questions at the end. So it's my pleasure to introduce Anthony DeCurtis. He will be moderating today. Anthony's been teaching here for about 20 years. He's also been a longtime contributing editor for Rolling Stone magazine, and he is our faculty director for the RealArts program. And he is also the best interviewer on the planet. So prepare yourself to be wowed and enjoy. Anthony?
Mingo, thank you for that generous introduction. You know, the RealArts program this is actually its 15th year. And, you know, among the things you start and, you know, you're involved with at the beginning, you know, some of them kind of fade away and others kind of limp along. But this program has really just gotten more robust. You know, plenty of applications, plenty of interesting places to get internships. And, you know, each year it just seems, you know, to have more energy around it. Much of that is due to the kind of oversight that's provided to it by R.J. Bernaco and Mingo Reynolds, who, you know, just do a terrific job of, you know, kind of keeping track of all this and making sure, you know, attracting new companies to be part of it, making sure that people end up in places that are meaningful to them, and, you know, just generally getting the word out. So, you know, we couldn't be happier with it. And in fact, I mean, in addition to our 5 esteemed, you know, former interns who will tell you more about their experience, completely by a fluke, I got an email yesterday from somebody who had an internship just over the summer. And what do I need? My glasses. Her name is Denali Sagner. I don't know if any of you happen to know her. Denali is among the best writers here I've ever taught, I have to say. I'd love to take credit for her, but you know, she came in pretty well formed. But you know, I like to stay in touch with students, and you know, I had emailed Denali, you know, asking if she was back in New York and what she was up to, and you know, maybe we could have a coffee or something. And she wrote back as follows. I mean, among the places that internships are available is the Flathead Beacon, which is in Kalispell, Montana, which, you know, of course, given the kind of New York and LA places that are available on the list, you know, don't necessarily, it doesn't sound like the most glamorous place, although Kalispell, I must say, I've been there, is incredibly beautiful. And here's what Denali wrote, and this is not a solicited comment. In some surprising news, I'm actually not in New York because I accepted a full-time offer from the Beacon, ! I went home for a month in September and I've been back in Kalispell as a staff writer since October. It has been a very unexpected and incredible adventure so far. They have me covering education as well as a smorgasbord of other things. I think I'm now the 3rd RealArts intern to stay at the Beacon past the end of her internship. It should be a serious testament to how great the newsroom is that they can convince so many Penn students to move to the Wild West. So this is an example of the, you know, the kind of things that RealArts makes possible. You know, I think, you know, whatever Denali goes on to do, you know, she's had quite an experience just as a reporter now at this place, getting a lot of responsibility and doing work that she really cares about and having a great time from the sounds of it. So I'm going to read off quickly a list of the places that we know are going to be participating this year. We're anticipating maybe 6 or 7 more companies to come in, but we've got 1812 Productions, Bomb Magazine, which is a new one, an arts publishing nonprofit with quarterly print publications, Brooklyn Films, Downtown Bookworks, Film Nation, Flathead Beacon, Get Lifted Productions, which is John Legend's production company, Grandview, the Library of Congress, Management 360, the Morgan Library and Museum, Mountain Path Entertainment, the Museum of the Moving Image, Pitchfork, Spiegel and Grau, Stern and Gibbs, Tremolo Productions, and Viacom. So, that's a pretty diverse and interesting, list that's, that's available. So, we'll discuss all that in more detail. Now, I'll ask each of our 5 participants to briefly introduce themselves and where they were, and just, a couple of sentences about their experiences, and then we'll have a discussion, and then we'll take your questions. So, why don't we just start down there at the end?
Hello. Okay. I'm Lillian. I am a junior studying physics and fine arts, and I interned with Stern and Gibbs. So they're 2 writers working out in LA.
Film writers. What do they do? Why don't you just say a little bit more about
Stuart Gibbs is a children's book writer. He writes like the Spy School series and a bunch of other children's books. And David Stern works on movies and also Broadway sometimes.
Great.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kaylin David, and I'm a senior studying cinema and media studies and economics. And I was a recipient of the RealArts summer funding prize. And I can talk about that in more detail. So I interned at United Talent Agency, which is a full-service talent agency that is based out in Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a junior studying classical studies, fine arts, and creative writing, and I interned at the Morgan Library and Museum. There's really a lot of different departments at the museum, but I was in the literary and historical manuscripts department, where I worked on transcribing letters.
Oh, there we go.
Hi everyone, I'm Zoe Goldstein. I am a senior majoring in cinema and media studies and Russian history. I interned at Warner Brothers Theater Ventures, which basically means that Warner Brothers takes their movie catalog and turns it into musicals or plays on Broadway and beyond. So our big one right now is Beetlejuice, so that's what we were working on. So yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm a senior studying communications with a minor in cinema and media studies. I interned at Spiegel and Grau, which is a startup publishing company in New York, and just working on a whole variety of tasks.
All right. Well, why don't we'll just start, talk about, maybe the kind of maybe the biggest surprise of, your experiences at these places, and also maybe the most significant, what you feel is the most significant lesson that you learned. Let's just go in the opposite direction. You're up again.
Okay, I think the biggest surprise from this summer that I learned at Spiegel and Grau is just really the amount of transferable skills you get on any. I can't speak to everyone else's internship, but I really enjoyed learning. I got a lot of specific industry knowledge, but I also felt an emphasis on skills like talking to your coworkers, on like managing your own projects. And I think that I wasn't really expecting to get many transferable skills in a very specific internship, and that was really surprising and rewarding. And I don't remember the second part of the question.
Let's see. That was the biggest surprise, and then also maybe a lesson that you took from your experience.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I took from my experience is like initiative, and these internships are really, really rewarding, and they're what you make of them. And I am like a person who is not good at reaching out and being like, do you want to meet? And I'm very cautious, and I kind of put myself out there, and it worked really well, and everyone was really receptive. And so I feel like just knowing that there's like a kind of a position of privilege in being an intern that you don't have when you're like a full employee, and just like using that to gain as much knowledge as you can.
What do you feel? I'm just curious about, when you say a position of privilege, say a little bit more about that, about what your status as an intern, maybe provides you in that regard.
Yeah, of course. Something that I realized quickly in my internship is that a lot of my coworkers had very defined roles where I got to sit on a marketing meeting, I got to sit in editorial meetings, I got to sit in the big meetings. So while everyone else had like specks of knowledge, I got a bigger perspective just because they weren't as pigeonholed about where to put me, and I'm sure that varies. But also there's privilege, I think, in being an intern and being able to kind of dip your toes in a lot of things. If you I remember hearing about a project to put together, like we were publishing a book, or they were publishing a book, and we had to put together a gift box. And I was like, can I kind of handle that and help you guys with that? And they were like, yeah, of course. And just getting that flexibility, I think, is a privilege, and also knowing that your time is limited. So no one's gonna like judge you if you're like doing everything you can to get the most out of it, instead of like kind of doing a lot of things versus being slow and steady.
What'd you do for the gift box?
Oh, we tried out a bunch of candies. So everyone in the
Always
office,
a winner, yeah.
Yeah, just like sucking on different lollipops. Like, you like that one?
Very good.
Okay, so I can talk a bit about, for me, the biggest surprise was how many projects are getting worked on at a given time. The department that I worked in was pretty small for how much they actually do, which I think is fascinating. Projects will get worked on and like not touched for many years, and then all of a sudden someone will come in and be like, I really want to do this play or musical, and it'll just start back up again. And I think hearing and listening in on like the daily agenda meetings, we have to meet with people in LA and then in New York, because I was based in New York. Those conversations like, oh, what's on the agenda today? How many plays and musicals do we need to finance? All that kind of stuff is fascinating to me. And I think another big surprise for me was I was able to go to Beetlejuice like 4 times over the summer, which was amazing. I went like backstage because they celebrated their like 500th performance celebration, and hearing about how much money it takes to create a set and then break it down again is like insane. It's like $1 million to build a set and then $1 million to like break down a set, and it's currently traveling on its like US tour. Like, I don't know how that happens. It's pretty amazing, especially because the set is so elaborate. And so hearing about that and learning about that and hearing the trade secrets behind like the magic behind Broadway was amazing. My boss was incredible because he was online and at home during the majority of the pandemic. And he was he prints out every single email he ever receives, which is a lot of paper, but it's something that I also do because I think it's great to sort of see it and be able to like review it and not have to like go through your emails again. And he was like, do you mind helping me file all this? And I was like, I would love nothing more. He's like, you can read all of my emails. He's like, nothing is a secret. I was like, oh my God. So I was reading like everything, understanding everything in the industry. It was really cool and fascinating. And so just hearing the conversations that go back and forth between executives in different departments in Warner Brothers was amazing. Yeah, what was the other question?
That's so funny. Lesson.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would echo the sentiment, learning how to talk to your coworkers. So Warner Brothers has an office in New York in Hudson Yards, and they occupy a bunch of floors. And my floor the floor that I worked on this summer used to also host Ellen. So it was like, could hold so many people. And like the DC Universe was also on our floor, like the comic book. And over the summer, obviously there weren't as many people and Ellen had just ended, so the floor was pretty sparse, but everyone who was there was very talkative. And so I was able to meet a lot of people on the floor, and learning how to do that and making sure that I'm making those connections was probably like the best thing that I've learned from this internship. I went to a bunch of workshops, so when a musical is on Broadway and then it gets turned into like a children's version, if you will, that like high schools and middle schools can put on, they have to workshop that a bunch of times to make sure that the person who originally created the show thinks that it's A-okay. So I was able to go to the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and the Beetlejuice workshop this summer. And what's crazy to me is, if anyone knows MTI, like if you ever did musicals, like everything is licensed through MTI, like all the executives were there. And they were like, oh, we're all going out to eat and discuss it afterwards. Like, please join. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to cry. Like, I've done all your musicals when I was in high school. Like, this is so cool. And so learning how to talk to people, making sure that, like, you just put yourself out there is amazing. You don't have to talk. Just, like, being present is also a very important skill to have. Just, like, being there if someone needs you. And so I think that was, like, one of the biggest takeaways that I had from this internship.
Terrific. Okay.
For me, I think because the Morgan Library is such a small museum relatively compared to most of the other museums in New York, I think for me it was a lot about learning how to interact between departments to work on like a singular project, and just like people have said, just learning how to work with coworkers, and just for me knowing how a museum operates. And I think one thing personally that I really benefited from was learning how to do research with other people, because I think in college you're kind of encouraged to just do research by yourself. So doing the internship was really helpful to learn how to research and work and cooperate with other people toward the same goal. I also...
Oh, I was just going to ask, how would that work? Could you just say a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so we basically, because the project I was working on was looking into the history of the museum's first director, Belle DaCosta Green, there was a lot of information that we really didn't have about her in the archives, so we had to do external research. And it was really just a process of going through articles, books. There are a lot of new biographies that have been coming out, so we'd read those and then talk with each other about the information we found. And I think it was interesting because sometimes, you know, we'd come up with the same observations, sometimes we'd have different observations, and then we'd be able to kind of put those together into something that could be expressed to inform the public about Green. So I think it's definitely a useful skill to have, just going along with knowing how to work with people as a whole.
Good. Caitlin?
Yeah. So surprise first, right? Biggest surprise.
Yeah.
So, you know, whenever I was starting exploring opportunities like within film and entertainment, a lot of people who I talked to, they would always say like, oh, like you started at a talent agency, it's like the best way to start. It's like sort of like grad school for entertainment. And I was like, okay, these people seem to know what they're talking about. They've been around. They're doing their thing. So I'll do this. And I think everyone said that, but I didn't really consider it to be actually like true like until I was there. It sort of really is the heartbeat of that whole like industry. And I think also what was a pleasant surprise to me is how well being at an environment like a talent agency serves people who have wide-ranging interests. So a lot of the work I was doing was within like the independent film group, and the independent film group themselves deals with TV sometimes, and their documentaries and their narrative films, and one of the projects I was working on, they were adapting a video game series into a film, and I really am a big fan of gaming also. And then there's also all those departments themselves. There's TV, there's music, there's film, there's esports, and like new media type departments like that. And it was really nice seeing how they all complemented with each other. In terms of like the biggest lesson that I learned, I mean, the previous panelists have already kind of gone over how it teaches you a lot of, you know, you learn a lot of soft skills that you can't really quantify, such as just like learning, you know, talking to people and whatnot. But I think the biggest lesson I learned was how important it is to be in an environment where initiative and sort of taking charge of like what you want your opportunity to be is really championed. And one of the pillars that UTA kind of preaches is how they sort of have a culture of entrepreneurship and how they really encourage you to make sort of like what you want to do. They say you can be the type of agent that you want to be, as specialized or as multi-hyphenated as you want. They always tell this one story that many years ago, this one guy was the assistant to the CEO, and he was like, hey, this was also like a year before YouTube came out, or like right when YouTube was coming out, and he was like, hey, I think that maybe like YouTubers and like digital creators are gonna kind of, they should be something that we're looking at. Not many people are really looking at that. And then the CEO looked at him and he was like, okay. And then the next day he was the head of the new media department at that agency. So it's kind of like, and there are like all across the different departments at that agency, there are a bunch of stories like that. So, for me, I'm from like a very small town, and this was kind of like the first time that the work that I was doing felt very real, because I was in LA and I was like, whoa, this is not Greencastle, Pennsylvania. And I kind of like really appreciated that, because I figured I had 8 weeks to really make an impact, and I did as much as I could and took his initiative to go the extra mile as much as I could during those 8 weeks. There were a lot of people who, after there was no mail to deliver, they were like, cool, we can just like chill. And I was like, that's not what I'm here to do. So I was like going around talking to different people, offering to read scripts for people. I was working a lot in the independent film group, so I was doing a lot of work for their festivals and movies that they were trying to sell at those festivals. So I think being in an environment that allows you to have the autonomy that you want to grow and to sort of seek out your opportunities was really important to me, and I think I found it at UTA.
Great.
That's cool. I'm excited. I actually want to speak a little bit more about my internship, because I think it was a little different from the other ones. So I didn't really work for a company. I worked for Stern & Gibbs, so they're actually doing very separate things, but they both graduated from Penn. And going into it, it's a very like loose internship. You don't really know what you're going to do, because it's dependent on what projects they're working on at the time.
Do they work in a specific office or?
No, so they actually both work from home.
Mm-hmm.
So I was out in LA, but doing work mostly, like either I would meet up with them to do work, or I would just do it from where I was staying. But biggest surprise, I think, was like how much I still learn, and also how like I really love my internship. I think it's one of the best ones. I'm biased, but they're super friendly, like amicable people. I went to Stuart Gibbs' birthday party. I met a lot of people. It was super cool. And I think what I really loved about mine was being able to see sort of two different types of writing, because they're both doing like writing work, but the stuff they do is really different, and being able to see both sides of like sort of how they work and what they're doing was really cool to me. And then I think my biggest lesson also was about connections. Like, connections really matter out in the entertainment world, but that's a good thing for us because we come from Penn, and there are a ton of people out there who graduated from Penn, and like, yeah, connections, like, but I think like that's a good thing for us as students. We should feel good about that. And so like I met a lot of people, talked to them, and I think that's really important going down the line.
Yeah, if I can maybe generalize a little bit on what the remarks that everyone made, which all were very good. I feel that one of the things about internships is you have to go into it. I'm emphasizing this kind of idea, maybe inspired by Denelli's email from Kalispell, that you have to go into things with an open mind and be available for things. The idea of initiative and all of that has come up a number of times, and that's really important. and it's important on the job, obviously, can I help with this or, that project or, whatever practical thing. But it's also, it's also important in other regards, in these kind of ancillary ways where things turn up when, you're in a certain environment where people are doing certain types of work, I mean, I'm making this up, but like if, the fourth time, that you have an opportunity to go see, Beetlejuice, I imagine, easy to say, well, I'm going to go hang with my friends or do something else. But like to go to the thing and, whoever is there, whoever you meet, whoever you see backstage, or, this idea that Kaylin was talking about, like where, some other people were saying, well, gee, we got all this stuff done, so now we can just like lay back. And it's just, I'm not here to do that. Like I didn't come out here to lay back. I mean, I could stay home and lay back, but like if I'm here, I'm going to make a point to talk to people. And there's a couple of different kind of anecdotes I'd like to share from my days at when I was on staff at Rolling Stone and sort of working in the office. As you might expect, this is the sort of heyday of magazines. Rolling Stone was huge, and everybody who was a writer there, you kind of, everybody was like a little wary of everybody else in a certain way. You got your assignments, you did them, and everybody wanted the magazine to be good, but you were always kind of keeping an eye on what other people were doing. And I remember one summer we got this kid from Berkeley who, which was nice in a certain way. The guy who founded the magazine, Jan Wenner, had gone to Berkeley and dropped out, but nonetheless had gone to Berkeley, was from San Francisco. So there was a kind of, I mean, we were based in New York by that point, but there was a kind of like, homey aspect about it. And he was just really friendly and like wasn't reading the codes of, we don't really socialize with each other. We're just like a little too cool for that and whatever. And he would kind of come in and just be like, well, hey, my friend is like interning at the Letterman show and like they have a softball team and they're in a league. And I thought it would be great if we could just have a softball team. And like, this was like nothing that in anybody's wildest dream would ever have occurred to any of us. But there was a kind of like inertia to our hipness, like it was just, well, all right, yeah, sure. And so suddenly we're all out together, like playing softball. This kid is sort of managing our schedule, and he really like, beyond the quality of the work that he did at the magazine, had a pretty massive impact on kind of on the tone of our office life, which was, really, really great. And if he had never, if he had just sort of read the tea leaves, like he was kind of too naive to know that he wasn't supposed to do that. And so he did it and it was great. Everybody loved it. And, when he left, we had like the biggest party ever, to kind of send him off. The other thing is, obviously, you want to do the most interesting stuff at any internship, but, often, or at least sometimes, you don't get to do that, your first day there. Maybe sometimes, you're asked initially to do pretty basic stuff and just do that stuff well. Like nobody gives you stuff for being better than doing the basic things that they give you. If I needed, copies made for a story I was working on, and somebody like felt like they were better than doing that, and the copies came back and they were unreadable and all this, like that made me think I can't really trust this person to do things. Whereas if they came back and everything was like really done well, I would think, this person really cares. They're making a commitment here. And I would then look for more interesting things for them to do. I felt I could rely on them. And, I think that generally is, an element of internships to keep in mind, to not just, be better than certain kinds of, work that you might be asked to do, to just get it done, and then also make an effort to to stay in touch with people, even around the office and afterwards. I remember there was a girl from Brown one time who was interning, and we sort of hit it off, like we just, she was an English major, that's what, I had, studied, and, and so she came in like the day she was leaving and just said, I hadn't seen her in a couple of weeks or something. And she said, oh, I wanted to let you know, it's my last day and I'm taking off and all this. And, I mean, God, that's really sad. I'll definitely miss you, definitely stay in touch. And the next day, my intern, got another job. I mean, my assistant got another job, and, she was going to leave, and I was able to just call back, my sort of intern friend from Brown and just said, hey, look, this position just opened up. Do you want it? And, I would not, maybe it should have, it wouldn't have occurred to me to do that if she hadn't stopped by and kind of brought herself like to the top of my mind again. So, in a polite but kind of consistent way, make sure that, people know you're around and, are aware of you and what you're doing and what your status is. Kaylin, why don't you talk about that, the prize that you won that, you said that you would talk about.
Sure.
Here's your opportunity.
Yeah, so it was, I was ecstatic to get an internship that was out in LA. And then after after I rode that initial high of getting the job offer, then the very next thought was, how am I going to pay for this? Because, and this also speaks to something I feel like that's, I think, a problem that a lot of people struggle with at Penn who want to go into the entertainment industry, because it's like, it is one of those industries where starting out, it's lesser paying as some other paths that people go under, but it's one that I think is fueled a lot by passion, and that's kind of, and the sort of the work is very interesting, and I think that's what, for me, makes it worth it. But yeah, so I mean, I was kind of budgeting out my expenses for this summer, and I was kind of worried. And then I remember just randomly one day seeing an email about the RealArts program having some summer funding prizes, and so I just applied, and it's like I gave a document of my budget saying, and I had listed like sort of the funding that I'd already been fortunate to get through the financial aid office, but and then that was actually really big, because for me, being out in LA for the first time and being interning for like a big company for the first time also, because previously I had only ever worked under like one person for projects and stuff like that. So I felt that it was really important to me to be in a position where I could wake up and sort of be the best version of myself every day. And I feel like having the more financial security through the funding prize was really important for me, and it was really big for me, because I didn't have to worry about like, how am I going to get to work every day because I can't afford a car, and like, how am I going to pay for like my dry cleaning and make sure that I can show up in a nice suit every day for work and not be like smelly. But those are just some examples of how like it's something that you don't think about, but whenever you're on a tight budget, like everything sort of counts. And so I was really grateful that I was able to get that, to have that prize. Like I said, it just allowed me to sort of, in an environment where I was very stressed and I was very worried about doing a good job, it was able to alleviate a bit of stress for me, and I was appreciative of that.
Great. We'll go around the horn one more time here and then open the floor to questions. I'm interested. We make selections, and then I think this is true. Like all of you were interviewed by the places where you ended up interning. And I wonder if you could just provide, a kind of brief overview of the kind of things that they asked about and how you felt like, you handled those, those questions. And, let's go back around that way.
Wait, so we're talking about the interview
Yeah,
itself?
the interview that, from the company.
Cool. Okay, so mine was actually really a casual phone call. I think they asked me about. So I work at the Daily Pennsylvanian with the design department, and they asked me what that was like because something about the nature of this internship is that it's very. Sometimes you won't have that much work, and then they'll just shoot you an email and be like, hey, like, I want this read by, a certain day, or like, can you read this and give me feedback? And at the DP, a lot of times we'll just have news break and come in, and like, it's a lot of waiting for other things to happen in the production line, and then we're on our work, so like, the schedule is like, it's a little nebulous. And I talked about how I'm pretty used to that, like comfortable with being flexible and having a flexible schedule and working whenever they needed me to. But other than that, I think we like just talked about like I don't know. They were just
How much kind of emotional prep did you do for the interview? Or even just other kinds of prep?
Oh,
Well, like I'm going to be doing this, I mean, I don't know if you knew specifically what they might ask you, but I mean, by emotional prep, like, how do I want to put myself forward? What is my vibe or whatever, however you would think of it.
I think I really wanted to go into it with an attitude of like, I'm not really sure what this internship is going to entail, but I'm ready for whatever it is, and I'm excited for whatever you might offer me. And another thing that I think helped me in my interview is, so David Stern and Stuart Gibbs both didn't study writing at Penn. I think David got an engineering degree and Stuart got a biology degree, and I'm studying physics. And they're really interested in people who kind of have this formal, different education background. Not that they won't take like somebody who's in cinema studies or English, but I think that they're really interested by those people because they connect with them. And that was something that we connected about too. So definitely for me, not having really studied like writing at Penn and having that be my main focus, I think helped me a lot in my interview.
Yeah, so the interview process at UTA, it's kind of weird, honestly. It's very long, and it's very, like, strung out. So for me, I like their application is very earlier than, like, most entertainment companies, like, recruit. I feel like entertainment's kind of known for being, like, recruiting more heavily in the spring. Like, they'll recruit for, like, full-time jobs, like, only a couple months before they want you to start, blah blah blah. But so I applied for the internship in October, and you do like a screener interview like over the phone where it's really just behavioral questions. They're asking you like, and one thing that's good is because since there's so many different departments, the agency really serves people with like a very wide range of interests and from all like sorts of background, regardless of whether you want to go into digital talent or film or TV or music or whatnot, podcasts. But yeah, I would say it's a lot of behavioral questions. It's like, do you kind of keep up with like what's happening in entertainment? Because like I think that's something that's really important for them, because since everything kind of starts at an agency, the agencies kind of are always in the know of what's happening. And if you're like not in the know of what's happening, then you're sort of like, I guess, like behind in their eyes. So they want to know that you're kind of like keeping up with the trends, what's going on. They also really want to kind of have a sense of like your taste. So like in all of like the 4 interviews I did, like every single person, whether it was like a recruiter or like an agent interviewing me or someone else, like an assistant, they would just ask like, what have you watched in the past month? Like, what have you watched? Like, what was something you really liked? Why'd you like it? And like, what was something you watched recently that you like hated? Why'd you dislike it? They kind of just want to see you able to like articulate like a point of view. I mean, because I feel like a lot, like at an agency specifically, so much of the job is just talking to people, and like talking to people, trying to like put projects together and whatnot. So I guess that's one way of them trying to sort of gauge that. But yeah, and other than that, I would also say like being able to loop in like your personal interests into like the type of work that like UTA did. So like I'm a big fan of like horror movies, for example. So like I talked about, I had read an article about like this one like UTA client who was like starring in like a new horror movie, and I was like, oh, like I'm a really big fan of horror. I see this person is starring in this movie that's coming out, and being able to do that also for the people who are interviewing you is like really helpful. You know, they love to hear that you want to be an agent, regardless of. I know I said that like everyone says that it's the best way to start is like going at it to an agency, but like don't tell them like, oh yeah, I want to be a writer, so I'm gonna work here so that maybe I can find the person who's gonna sign me. No, but like I actually do want to be an agent, but like they always love to hear like, so you want to be there? They'll ask you like, so you want to be an agent, and then just be like, yeah, I do, totally. No, but and also like, you know, the more final ones are like interviewing like with an actual agent or that agent's assistant. So like I was interviewing with this one agent, and one thing that she was very known for is if anyone's seen the movie Hidden Figures, she kind of like that was a book that started in UTA's book department that they had the rights to, and she kind of like took this book and like got it off the ground to have it made into a movie. And I remember reading that about her, so I like said that I was like, oh yeah, I really like how the different departments collaborate. Like for example, like with you, what you did with Hidden Figures, she was like, oh my gosh, you know the Hidden Figures story. And then it was like a very much like more laid back, relaxed interview from there. So I feel like finding something, because it can come off, the people can come off as scary sometimes. But so if you can find something, I guess, organic to sort of like lighten the conversation, break the ice, makes it a lot easier. But yeah, basically the interview process goes from like October to like February, I think is when I had the last interview. But it's like the first two were within like 2 weeks of each other. And then like I didn't hear from them until January, and then they're like, "Hey, it's time for your final interview." I was like, "Okay." And so then I did that one, and then the final interview that they don't tell you is actually an interview is in February. I remember they said, "Hey, this is like not an interview, but the recruiting manager wants to have a call with you." I was like, "Oh, cool! I'm gonna get a job offer." And then I get on the call, and then they ask me like an interview question. I was like, I was not prepared for this, but. Yeah, so it's kind of a weirdly long process, but one that's rewarding, and I think it's just meant to kind of gauge your vibe a little bit, so to speak.
For me, I had an interview with the department director that the internship was for, and I ended up actually working as his intern. And from the get-go, he was actually just really friendly, pretty casual, and it gave me a good sense of what working there would be like. And looking back on it, I feel like those two environments, the interview and actually working there, are pretty comparable. So I think it was a good experience for me. And I think for the most part, he mostly asked about my interests, whether or not they related directly to museum work, why I was interested in that museum specifically. And then I think, well, for me, I had actually, I'd read a book about the museum's director a couple months prior to hearing about the internship. And so when I brought that up in the interview as my reason for applying for the internship, it was just kind of like you said, like it immediately lightened the mood. And that topic ended up being exactly what I worked on for the entirety of the internship. So I guess my advice overall would be, additionally, whether or not something relates directly to the interview, you can use it to show facets of yourself that are helpful in internships. like, even though I was working in a museum, I still mentioned like my athletic background, because that can show like your skills in either teamwork or like determination, and they show that you have skills that are able to be applied to different fields. So I think for me, it was a really good opportunity to just be authentic and try to gauge the environment that I would be working in based on the environment of the interview, which in my case was really applicable.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm thinking what my interview process was like. I know I've had all that time, but I cannot remember it. It's been so long ago, everyone. I apologize. But the main thing that I took away from it was the Warner Brothers internship came after the majority of the internships are published. So it was kind of an after the fact thought. And I hadn't gotten into any jobs at that point. I hadn't been accepted anywhere. And I was like, okay, like I've accepted, like I'm gonna accept a fee. Like I'll just hang out with my family this summer and like my dogs. Maybe I'll take a class like to try and graduate early or just do anything. Maybe I'll be a lifeguard at the beach. Like I had no plans. And then I saw this posting and I was like, holy shit. No, holy crap. Sorry, I don't have my sister cards. I was like, oh my God, like I have to apply. Like this is my dream. I've done theater my entire life. And I've done like, obviously I'm in the cinema department. And so the cinema department's more like focused on, cinema. I was like, but I love theater. Like that's my thing. I was like, I have to apply. I applied and I did not hear anything. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just hang out with my dogs. And then I get an email and they're like, hey, we want to interview you. When are you free next week or the week after? I was like, unfortunately, I'm about to go to Europe with the Penn Glee Club, and I will definitely not be able to like find a quiet space for like 3 weeks. They're like, oh, okay, are you available tomorrow? I was like, oh. So I basically did no prep, but I allowed myself to like show my truest self, which is I'm a very bubbly person, and I am kind of a go-getter, and I tried to show that throughout my interview process. It was only one, and then I didn't hear back for like many weeks, and I was like, oh, okay, I've been ghosted, and that's totally fine. Like I've heard that you're gonna get ghosted a lot in sort of entertainment. I was like, I was ghosted, and then I randomly got an email. I was like driving back to Philly to pack up my apartment after visiting my family, and I was like in the car with all my friends. And I get this email, and it's like, oh, you've been accepted. And I started, like, screaming. We had to pull over the car. It's very exciting. But I think one thing that really troubled me about my interview, and I was like, this is why I didn't get the job, is they asked me my thoughts on, like, current shows on Broadway. And I had just seen Beanie Feldstein and Funny Girl. And, like, I personally, obviously there are, like, issues with Leah Michele. Like, I'm not going to disregard that. But I had seen Beanie, and I was like, don't love this, but I do like the show Funny Girl. It's about a Jewish girl who goes into entertainment. My last name's Goldstein, so very Jewish. And I was like, I love Funny Girl, but I didn't love Beanie. Like they changed a couple things that like made it to be more like focused on her, blah blah blah. And we were talking a bit back and forth about that. And after the interview, I got off and I was like, oh no. Like, what if, like, he worked on that? Like, what if I just, like, ruined my shots? Like, I did research on him, and I was, like, double-checking that he didn't have anything to do with it. He didn't, luckily. But I think he liked my honesty. And I think that's something really important is, like, don't just say something because that's what people want to hear. Like, I read treatments, and I read sort of, like, scripts throughout my internship, and my boss asked me my honest opinions. He's like, did you like it? Like, do you think it would do well on Broadway? And I was like, I don't have the credentials to do that. Like, why should I be the one deciding this? But I think he wants to see, like, he's one person who's seen a lot of different things. Like, we're not in the same, like, age group. Like, I was 21 reading a script, and he, like, had graduated Penn a while ago. And he has kids. Like, we're a very different, like, demographic. And I think that's something that a lot of these jobs want as well. Like, if they're asking your opinion, they want your honest opinion. And I think that is like the one takeaway I have from that interview is I was like talking about like the shows that I liked and disliked on and off Broadway. And I talked about like, I loved Six, the musical. I think it's like a feminist take on like obviously Henry VIII, and I'm from England. Like that was so much fun to see. And I just saw Anne Juliet. Like I wrote him an email after I saw Anne Juliet, and I was like, oh, I'm going to add this to my list of like musicals I love. Like they want to hear your honest opinions about things, because as an intern, they're going to use you as like a soundboard to like have ideas to share with, especially if it's like kind of that one-on-one relationship in that smaller environment. Yeah, I think that was like my interview process. If you have more questions, just ask me.
Yeah, actually, I want to echo what Zoe said. I was at my internship and I read a manuscript and they were like, "Did you like it?" And I was like, I loved it, but they weren't, and everyone else in the meeting didn't. And then I was like, it was all right. And then she was like, because if you loved it, we would have bought it, right? And I was like, what? But I couldn't backtrack. So I was like, it was all right. It was all right. So now it haunts me.
Do you think they were kidding around with you? Or do you think they
No, it was like a
really?
one-on-one
Wow.
lunch. She was like,
That's fantastic.
yeah, so really do be honest. But my interview process, I'm kind of the opposite of Zoe. I'm like a chronic prepare anxious mess. So I did a lot of research on Spiegel and Grau. One of the co-founders came to Penn because she was she's an alumni a year before, and I saw her on, I got to watch the Kelly Writers House live stream because I was too sick to go to the actual event, and I was like, well, there's my chance. I didn't shake her hand, I'm never getting this internship. And then it worked out well because I prepped for the basic questions, right? Tell us about a time, right? A weakness of yours that you turn to a strength. And once I prepped for those and I felt okay with my answers, yeah, talk about yourself. I like to do this thing where my house is full of posters and I'll take my interview calls in front of the posters, and every time they're like, oh, I like that movie, or I like this painting. And that's a really easy way to just showcase maybe a part of yourself and not have to try to figure it out how to push that into conversation. But yeah, I think something that's just to keep in mind for interviews, internships are hard. Internships are stressful, especially applying to them. So I think keeping in mind that if you're just being genuine, and even if you don't get it, maybe they just honestly, that environment wasn't for you. And keeping that in mind and just going into an interview feeling maybe you did your prep, you did what you could, and this is who you are. And I mean, just being hopeful, I think.
Yeah, I think that. Oh yeah, go right ahead. I want to open the floor.
Oh yeah, no, I want to open to the floor too. But really quickly, I have something to say about interviews that I did not realize until I sort of did this one, and that all my roommates who are in consulting do. So it's definitely helpful. You should have a document that basically has the basic questions where you should answer the questions like, what is your biggest weakness? What is your greatest strength? When is the time you were a leader? How do you work in group settings? A couple words to describe yourself. Once my roommates told me to do that last year, I created a document and I sort of update it throughout the year if something comes up. And it is insanely helpful because interviews, they ask the same questions. You just have to tailor it to your job, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to talk about a time I led robotics if they're asked 60 people in robotics, if they're asking about a team of 3. That's not helpful. You need to tailor your answers, but have basic stories and thoughts in mind. That is what my roommates told me, and it was the best thing because I had that ready to go. So when I had to do my one-day prep for my internship, it meant it was more just detail-oriented research rather than a whole 30-minute interview prep, if that makes sense. Yeah, sorry.
Well, does anyone have any questions? Either for specific people or more generally? No one. That's extraordinary. Yeah, go ahead. Do we need to get him a mic or no? No. It's just we record these for people who, for people who are streaming it later, so they'll hear your question.
Hi. In terms of applying, do you apply for specific ones or do you get matched? How does that work?
Oh.
So the good news is this is all spelled out on the website, but you can apply to up to 2 of them. So you apply to specific ones, but you can apply to 2 if you are attracted to 2 of them. So just to give you a little bit of sense of timeline so that we don't have to have someone ask the question. Typically, we announce the full list of internships within the next week or so, and the deadline to apply is usually soon after you return. So usually Martin Luther King weekend is about when the deadline to apply is. And typically what we ask for is a cover letter. That's the most important part of the application. So spend time on that. This might come as a surprise to you, but most college students' resumes look really similar. So you need to shine in your cover letter to show things that aren't on the resume, things about your personality that you bring to this particular internship, and do really look at what the internship's asking for and speak to those points. Make sense?
Thank you.
Do you still need to submit the coursework list? So something as well that we had to submit last year is you submit your courses that you've taken and how they might pertain to the internship itself. And then I wrote a little bit of a blurb, like why this class relates to this internship opportunity. So that was like a big thing that I had to come up with. That's a big part of the application process.
And to echo Zoe, that's another opportunity to kind of highlight specifically your academic work and how it relates. It's another way to kind of sell yourself on the particular positions, either stuff you've studied or transferable skills in the courses that you've taken that you think could relate to the opportunities.
Yeah, and you don't want to be too schematic, but in your cover letter, it also shows your ability to write, and also, if one of these places, either something that they've done or the place itself is a place that has been meaningful to you, genuinely meaningful to you, I would certainly say that. I think that has an impact on the people who are reading it. Anyone else? No more questions. All right. Well, why don't we just, as a final thing, why don't we, do any of you have final words that you would like to share? So, please don't panic. You don't need to.
It's like, do I prep? And they're like, no, it's fine. I was like, what?
Yeah, I'm starting to prep right now. Yeah. Right.
I think just one last thing that I forgot to mention about the interview process is that I'm blanking here. Yeah, I don't know. I had done work studies before at Penn, and those are incredibly useful to highlight. So I did marketing for the Free Library of Philadelphia, and they genuinely asked about my resume, and just like knowing how your work is tied to the internship, even if it's minimal things. Like I was like, yeah, I ran 500 copies for the Free Library, and then at work, like I did that, and that was something I think they took note of. So just thinking about your past experiences is how they relate can be like really powerful too, and it's kind of underrated, I think.
Sorry, I do talk a lot, so I don't want to talk for too long if anyone has any questions. But I'm going to echo the setting up of your interview space. Although I don't sound it, I'm from England, so I have a British flag behind my desk. And every time, without fail, and I've been doing I've been doing a lot of interviews, like, someone will ask me about it, and I'm able to easily bring up, oh, I'm from London, I just don't have the accent. Like, I've lived there for now 22 years. Make sure you make your space like you. I mean, there are a lot of times in the more professional environment, as you get older, where they're like, you should really have like a blank space and a blank wall behind you. You can't have too many distractions. But like, we're college kids. Like, people are like sophomore, like you're ranging from like freshmen who are like 17 at the youngest to like 22 as seniors. Like, you're able to have more of that leeway and make sure like you show your truest self. Because I think that's like the best takeaway that I had. Like, I was able to be myself in this internship, and I made so many connections with people on my floor, people beyond, and I think that's because like I wasn't trying to be someone else. And if it doesn't work out, something will come to fruition. Like, I applied to the internships through RealArts in the initial round, and I didn't get any. And I was like, oh, okay, this is like the final, like, I will be with my dogs this summer. And then there were these new postings. Like, there are new postings everywhere at Penn. Like, this isn't the end all be all, and I think that's something important to note. Like, if something doesn't happen, it will be okay. It's very hard to hear that when you're at Penn, especially because it's so pre-professional, and it is very much like my friends who are graduating this year, like, they've had their jobs since sophomore year, because it's like finance. But it's a very different setup with entertainment and that creative field. A lot of people are creatives and they're a little slower to responding to your emails, or they're like not reading applications right away. So I think the main thing is that, like, I came to their office and I think I cried. I was like, nothing's happening. And then, of course, the internship got posted later, and I applied, and I was talking to my boss after the fact, and he's like, there were a lot of people that applied. I did not expect that many. He's like, I appreciated how honest you were. And I was like, okay. Like, it's okay. It'll be okay. And I think, like, that's sometimes really hard to hear, because I'm having to hear it now as a senior, like, finding my job opportunities, like, post-graduation, which is, like, full-time. I'm like, take that deep breath. If it doesn't work out right now, there's something that's going to happen in the future. I'm trying to think where else I looked for, like, job postings. I always checked in with RealArts. But then, like, the cinema department has job opportunities. The theater arts department sometimes posts job opportunities. The English department. So, like, I think it's important, if this is something that you want to do, make sure you, like, cast your net wide, because there are a lot of opportunities, and there are a lot of graduates from Penn who want to help students who want to be creative with their future endeavors. Sorry, that was a lot.
I guess I have two pieces of advice. I would say, for one, I tend to get really in my head about, like, you know, what if I don't have enough experience for them to actually accept me for this position? But I think for internships, just remember, like, this is where you're gaining that experience, so they're not going to be as critical about you having to have past experience in whatever field you're looking to go into. So I think just try to relax a little bit about that, and just try to have fun. And then also, for me, another thing, in addition to the financial awards that was really helpful, was on the RealArts website, they list housing options. So for me, being in New York, it was definitely like a financial crunch, because the Morgan is, like, in the middle of Manhattan, and it's really busy and really expensive. And so there was one housing program, EHS, Educational Housing for Students, that was able to save me a lot of money and a lot of transport time. So just make sure that you're looking at all the resources that are offered on the website, because those can really help you just to have a more fulfilling experience at your internship.
I think what's been most helpful for me is that, in terms of, like, this program, and also just, like, in general, I think if you are ever feeling, like, lost or not really knowing the best way to sort of either explore an opportunity or prepare for an opportunity, or seek them out, I think reaching out to people who've walked that path before is really helpful. It's certainly been the most important factor for me in the whole journey I've taken, whether it's someone who graduated 5 years ago and you want advice on where to live in a new city and how they were able to get by as they were going to their entry-level roles, or finding someone in the Penn entertainment community who has, like, your dream job, and just getting on the phone with them for 10 minutes, asking the path that they walked and any advice that they have for you. I think that it's a very tight-knit community at Penn, and I think that ends up being one of its greatest strengths. I've never had an alumni not be willing to give me 10 or 15 minutes of their time on the phone, and those 15 minutes can end up being very, very helpful, especially if you follow up with them and just keep yourselves as, like, part of their community too. So
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think what I want to add is also go for things that you might think you might not get. Like, I, as only a physics major when I applied, was like, I'm not gonna, like, get accepted into RealArts. I'm like, this is just for fun. I don't know. And then like they got back to me and they're like, we'd like to interview. And then I was like, oh wait, this maybe is like really kind of what I want to do over this summer. And I had to like call my parents and be like, hey, like, would it be okay if I went out to LA? And I'm from the Philly suburb, so it's far for me. But if I hadn't even taken that chance, I never would have like gotten to experience something so unique, and like honestly, it's changed my life. So yeah, even if you have doubts, just go for it, and you never know what may happen.
Well, this was a really substantive panel. Thank you all so much for your comments. We have like a minute left, but if you have a question, why don't you ask it? Sorry. That's okay.
Hi. So I think it's very easy to have like a formula sort of when you're writing a cover letter. So do you have any tips on how to like remain creative or individual like when you're writing a cover letter for an internship, like that may help you stand out to a possible employer?
Having read many cover letters, I always liked ones that are like pretty straightforward. You know, you don't have to like, you know, dance on the head of a pin, and it, you know, it's not going to win you the Pulitzer Prize. But, you know, you want to sort of be honest. You know, if you have a voice as a writer, like if you're funny, you know, don't be afraid to be funny. Or if you're, you know how to turn a phrase, don't be afraid to turn a phrase. But, you know, just try to go as directly as possible to, you know, to what it is that you're seeking out. You know, like they're asking for certain things, address those things. And as I said, the more that you can personalize it, I don't know, you know, I read that book that you published. I, you know, saw that film that you did. I saw, you know, whatever that could be that really does, you know, that you can genuinely do. I mean, I don't honestly believe in sort of faking it, you know. I mean, you know, everybody does their best, you know, but I would, you know, if you can honestly have something that you could say along those lines about the company, their work, you know, anybody who is associated with it, that you could genuinely put forward and say something meaningful about, I wouldn't hesitate to do that.
Can I also add?
Yeah, by all means.
Please read it out loud to yourself. Have your friends look at it. Don't have typos. Because if you have a typo in your cover letter, it will have a very profound effect.
Honestly, people misspell the name of like the company that they're applying to like all the time. That happens all the time.
And
so,
just, if, you know, you're going to be doing editing and rewriting. When you're finally ready to push the button, read it out loud to yourself. You will catch that there are two ofs in the sentence or something, and it just makes it look so much more professional if there aren't any typos in the letter. And keep it to a page. Don't have a 4-page cover letter. 1 page.
all right. Well, thank you all again. And thank you all for coming. And good luck to everyone if you apply.
I also want to do one shameless plug for those of you who are seniors, who are interested in exploring the entertainment industry. We, in the spring, do a weekly lunch series where we have people in all aspects of entertainment either Zoom in or come for a visit and talk to you. So if you are interested in that, please email RealArts and we'll make sure you're on the list to invite. All right? Emails are on the website. And everybody have a great day.